Her name was Evelyn Grace. She was just 19 when it all happened. She lived alone in a small wooden house inherited from her grandmother. It sat right at the edge of a quiet little town, tucked deep in a thicket of trees, far away from the main road. You wouldn't even know the house was there unless you were looking for it. The road leading up to it was barely a path anymore, overgrown with moss, surrounded by fog most mornings. But Evelyn loved that. She wasn't a loner by force. She chose the quiet. She liked the sound of wind in the trees, the distant calls of owls at night and waking up to complete silence except for the rustle of leaves. She didn't have any family left. Her parents had passed away when she was still a teenager, and the only thing they left her was that old house and a few family books. But Evelyn never really seemed lonely. She was calm, soft-spoken, always carrying a little leather-bound journal everywhere she went. People in town knew her as the quiet girl by the woods. Her routine was simple. Wake up early, brew some tea, read a book, maybe take a walk through the trees and write. Always write. At night her lights would still be on, and if anyone passed by, which was rare, they might catch a glimpse of her at the window, scribbling in that journal of hers under a dim yellow lamp. Everything seemed peaceful, until one night. Around 2 in the morning, her only neighbor, a retired old man named Henry, called the police. He told them he'd heard a woman screaming. The sound came from Evelyn's direction, but it wasn't just any scream. It was frantic, terrified, desperate. He said it sounded like someone being dragged or maybe held down. The screams kept coming in waves, louder and louder, until silence. Just like that. The police showed up the next morning. There were 2 officers assigned to check in. Evelyn didn't answer the door. They knocked and called her name for 5 minutes before forcing the door open. The front door was locked from the inside. The windows were shut tight. Nothing seemed broken or disturbed at first glance. But the moment they stepped inside, both officers described the same thing: an overwhelming chill in the air. The kind of cold that doesn't feel like weather. The kind that feels wrong. The living room was messy. A chair was tipped over. A vase shattered on the floor. A cup of tea had spilled across the rug, the liquid still faintly damp. No signs of a break-in, nothing stolen, no blood. But something was definitely off. Then they reached her bedroom. The door was locked from the inside. They had to break it down, and what they saw made their stomachs twist. The room was eerily still. It wasn't trashed or ransacked, nothing like that. But there was this stillness, like time had stopped in there. On the bed, resting neatly on top of a crumpled blanket, was a small red journal, open. Its pages fluttered slightly, even though the windows were shut. On the floor, a small flashlight was rolling in place, as if it had just fallen. Evelyn's phone was still charging on the nightstand. Her shoes were neatly lined up by the door. Her wallet was untouched, but Evelyn was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints, no fingerprints. It was like she'd just vanished. One of the officers, a woman named Jenna, picked up the journal. She would later tell her colleagues that touching it made her feel uneasy. The cover was damp, specifically the back of it. It wasn't wet, like from water, but thick and sticky, like ink or something else. The first few pages were normal, typical journal entries, day-to-day thoughts, what she read, what tea she liked that week. Then it shifted. The writing got shorter, nervous, fragmented. She wrote about hearing whispers from the woods at night. Sometimes they were soft, like wind in the trees. Other times they sounded like someone standing right outside her window. Then came the entries about her mirror. She said the mirror in her room would fog up randomly, even when she wasn't using hot water or cooking. Sometimes, late at night, she'd see something in the reflection. A figure, similar height, similar frame, but the face was always blurred, like fog. She described feeling watched when she brushed her hair, and every time she looked too long, the reflection would move, even if she didn't. Then Jenna reached the final page. This is where it gets disturbing. The handwriting changed. It was messier, almost frantic. Not written in pen. It looked like it had been scratched onto the page using a finger, thick, uneven lines, the color dark red. The writing was still wet when Jenna touched it. And it wasn't ink. The words written across that page sent chills down her spine. I'm not alone in the mirror. That was it. No signature, no date, just that one terrifying sentence. And near the bottom corner of the page, there were smudges, like fingerprints, 5 of them. As if someone, something with small hands, had gripped the page from the other side. Jenna snapped the book shut and immediately filed it into evidence. They searched the rest of the house, but there were no new clues, no signs of where Evelyn might have gone, no blood trails, no drag marks, no calls made from her phone. It was like the girl had disappeared into thin air. But the weird part, people started getting sick. Everyone who'd been inside that house, everyone who had touched that journal, even briefly, began experiencing strange things. Officer Mark, who helped carry the journal into the station, started having dreams about being watched in his sleep. Another officer, Luis, claimed that the mirrors in his apartment would fog up randomly, even when there was no heat or steam. And 3 days later, Jenna collapsed in the bathroom at the station, eyes wide open, non-responsive, whispering something over and over under her breath. Whispering something over and over under her breath. No one could understand it at first, until one of her fellow officers leaned in. She was saying, "She's not done. She's still looking for ink." They rushed her to the hospital. She never woke up. Back at the station, when they went to retrieve the journal, now locked in the evidence room, they noticed something new. A fresh message had been added. Same page, same red writing, same horrible smell. The new words read, "Did you look in the mirror this morning? So did I." They kept the journal locked up after that. Not in the regular evidence box either. They actually placed it in a sealed drawer wrapped in plastic, with a warning note taped to the outside. "Do not open. Do not read." No one dared touch it again for a while, but even then weird things kept happening. It started with the lights. Every time someone entered the evidence room where the journal was kept, the lights would flicker. Not once or twice, every time, and only that room. One night, Officer Luis went in to grab a case file. He was only in there for a minute, but when he came out, he looked pale, shaking. He told his partner that while he was in there, he heard whispering. Not from outside the door, from inside the drawer. He swore it was a girl's voice, quiet, gentle, saying one sentence over and over, "It's your turn to write." After that, the captain ordered the journal to be moved out of the building completely. They put it in storage in a locked vault beneath the city archives. Only 2 people had the key. They didn't want anyone near it. But it was already too late. The people who had handled the journal, who touched the page written in blood, started experiencing things that went beyond nightmares. Jenna, the officer who first found it, never woke up. She passed away in her hospital bed 5 days later. Cause of death: unknown neurological trauma. And the night she died, something terrifying happened. The hospital's security footage caught her room lights flickering wildly just minutes before the heart monitor flatlined. Then there was a frame, just 1 second, where her mirror, the one across from her hospital bed, showed 2 reflections. Jenna, and something behind her, something with long dark hair and no face. They said it was a glitch, corrupted frame, but the nurse who reviewed the tape quit the next morning. She refused to speak about it. Meanwhile, back in town, people started digging into Evelyn's life. The more they looked, the more questions came up. Turns out that old wooden house Evelyn lived in, it didn't just belong to her grandmother. Before that, back in the 1950s, it used to be a care home, a place where families sent relatives with spiritual disturbances. That's what the documents called it. There were barely any records. But one name showed up repeatedly: Mary Grace, Evelyn's great-aunt. She was admitted in 1953 after claiming she could speak to her own reflection. They kept her in isolation for 6 years before she disappeared. Yeah, disappeared. No body, no sign of escape. Just a cracked mirror in her room and a diary entry left behind written in smeared red. "I found the other side. She's waiting." The same phrasing, the same style of writing, just like Evelyn's. That's when people started wondering if Evelyn had ever really been alone in that house, or if maybe something else had been passed down through the bloodline, something that lived in glass, reflected, waiting. They brought in a forensic linguist to compare the handwriting between Mary's journal and Evelyn's. He said, quote, "They're eerily similar, but not identical. The writing looks like it's trying to copy itself, almost like someone or something is mimicking the person who's holding the pen. Meanwhile, more strange reports came in. The night janitor at the police station swore he saw a girl standing in the women's bathroom, but when he stepped in, it was empty. The sink faucet had been left running, and someone had drawn 5 small fingerprints in the fogged-up mirror. One of the officers, a rookie named Darren, couldn't stop reading the case files. He got obsessed, wouldn't stop talking about how Evelyn was still trying to finish the story. He was found asleep in his patrol car a few nights later, clutching a piece of paper. It was torn from a journal. The red writing was back. "You read her words, now I'll write yours." After that, the department officially closed the case, labeled it unsolved disappearance, locked the evidence away. The journal was last seen being shipped out to a secure cold storage facility across state lines. No one has dared open it since. But here's the part that still haunts the people who worked that case. About a week after the journal was moved, a local grocery store reported an odd online order. Someone named E. Grace placed a delivery request. No phone number, no address listed, just GPS coordinates that pointed straight to the edge of the woods where Evelyn's house once stood. The order was simple: milk, bread, red candles, and 1 bottle of red ink. The message box read, "She ran out last time." For a while, people thought it was over. Evelyn was gone. The journal was locked away. The house had been left to rot. No one wanted to go near it anymore. Even the mail carrier started skipping that end of the road, pretending like there was nothing there. But it wasn't over. Not even close. 1 year later, a group of college kids on a ghost hunting trip found the house again. It had been boarded up, but the door was barely hanging on by the hinges. One of the guys in the group, a skeptic, went in first. He live-streamed the whole thing on his phone, just for laughs. The footage made it to the internet, but it only lasted 42 seconds before cutting off completely. In those 42 seconds, you can hear him joking around, walking through the living room, and then he sees something in the mirror. He stops, goes quiet. Then he whispers, "Why is she smiling if I'm not?" And that's when the screen glitches, the audio distorts, and everything cuts out. He was never found. The rest of his group waited outside. When he didn't come back out, they called the police. Search teams went in, but all they found inside were boot prints leading up to the mirror, but none leading away. And the mirror cracked from the inside. Since that night, reports started popping up again, not just around that town, but in other places, other cities, other homes. People began receiving strange packages in the mail. No return address, just a red notebook, and a single page written in blood-red ink. Each page had a different message, but they all ended the same way. "Now you write." Some of the recipients vanished. Others tried to burn the books, but the pages wouldn't catch fire. They'd just blacken, then return to normal the next morning. And a few of them started writing back. They said they didn't want to, but they couldn't help it. Their hands moved on their own. They'd black out for hours, only to wake up and find whole pages filled with things they didn't remember writing. Things they didn't want to remember. One woman in Ohio claimed the journal wrote to her, responded to questions she asked in her head, gave her answers she'd never told anyone, secrets buried since she was a child. Another man said the journal gave him nightmares, but not of ghosts or monsters. He kept dreaming of himself, sitting in front of a mirror, smiling, even though he knew he wasn't. The final straw came when one of the investigating officers, retired by then, took his own life. He left a note. Just a single sentence, scrawled in shaky red ink. She wants her story to live on, even if she has to steel your hands to write it. Since then, the case has become urban legend. Some people say the journal still exists, hidden away in a cold locked box somewhere deep underground. Others say it's not a journal anymore. It's every journal, every blank page that's ever made you feel uneasy, every mirror that fogs up when no one's around, every time you see your reflection move just a second too late. That's her, writing, waiting, watching, and here's the worst part, and I swear this is true. There's a guy on Reddit, just a random poster, who shared this whole story about the Evelyn case. He said he'd read it online, thought it was fake, until a few days later he found a small red notebook in his mailbox. No postage, no name. The first page simply said, You shouldn't have read this far.